There are poisons you don't drink from a glass, but that seep in word by word, gesture by gesture, until they corrode your soul. And the worst part is, they don't come from strangers, but from those closest to you. Family, friends, partners, people who smile to your face, but deep down are harboring resentment, envy, or contempt. You might have spent years living alongside them without realizing it, excusing their behavior, telling yourself that's just how they are, or that it's your duty to endure. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone close to you wishes you well. Some secretly despise you. Today, I'm going to show you the clear signs, ones you've probably noticed but haven't dared to name. And let me warn you, the last one will be the hardest to accept because it forces a decision many people avoid, even though their peace depends on it. I'm Gabriel, and I want you to stay with me until the end, because once you see these signs for what they are, you won't be able to look at these people the same way again. And trust me, that's the first step to setting yourself free. Let's begin. Tell me something. How many times have you tolerated a harsh joke that deep down felt like a knife to the gut? How many times have you laughed just to keep the peace, to avoid making a scene, even though you knew that comment wasn't innocent, that there was something more behind it? Don't answer yet. Because today, right here, I want to be blunt with you. This is the first point, and there's no sugarcoating it. They belittle you in every conversation, even if they disguise it as humor. It's easy to brush off those words dressed up as jokes. Don't take it so seriously, they'll say. It was just a joke, they'll add. But behind every constant jab, every comment that downplays your achievements, your choices, or who you are, there's something darker at play. It's not humor, it's contempt, plain and simple. And if you don't see it, if you keep convincing yourself it's harmless, you're handing over the keys to your self-worth to someone who secretly enjoys watching you feel small. Let me tell you something. In ancient Rome, gladiators didn't just fight with swords. They had to endure public humiliation before they even entered the arena. They were paraded around, mocked in front of the crowd, their spirits broken before they could even lift a weapon. That's exactly how constant mockery works. It disarms you before you realize it, until you start believing maybe you deserve that disrespect. Marcus Aurelius wrote it with brutal clarity. What disturbs us is not what others say, but how we judge those words. But be careful, because this isn't just about staying calm inside. This is about recognizing when someone close to you is chipping away at your dignity under the excuse of familiarity. And let me be clear, if you let those words define you, you're not being stoic, you're being a hostage. At a certain age, after raising children, working for decades, burying loved ones, you'd think you'd be surrounded by respect and care. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's your own family throwing those condescending lines. You don't get it anymore. Why are you even giving your opinion at your age? And they say it so often. You start second-guessing yourself. So I ask you, how much longer will you let yourself be the target of their insecurities? Because that's what it is. Someone who needs to drag others down doesn't know how to rise on their own. But you don't have to play that game. You weren't born to be the punchline. You were born to hold your dignity even when the world tries to strip it away. I know it's hard. Sometimes it's a child making those remarks. Sometimes it's a friend you've known for years. People who, out of habit or hidden resentment, feel the need to make you feel small. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't control what they say, but you can control how you choose to respond. Are you going to keep laughing just to avoid confrontation? Or are you finally going to start setting clear boundaries? Epictetus said we're not responsible for others' actions, only for our own. And you, who've lived long enough to recognize patterns, know when a joke isn't innocent. It's time to stop excusing it. Today, it might seem like a harmless comment. Tomorrow, it's the stone wearing down your confidence. Don't look the other way. Don't say, "That's just how he is," or "That's just how she is." Ask yourself, who really needs to tear you down to feel superior, and why should you let them? The answer you give yourself is the first step toward freeing yourself, because someone who truly respects you never needs to mock you to shine. And if you realize that person close to you doesn't respect you, then it's time to rethink who deserves to be close. And don't let your guard down, because what's coming next is even more revealing. There's another sign many people brush off, but it's slowly draining you without you even realizing it. Stay with me. We just talked about those disguised jabs, those comments that chip away at you in front of everyone without you even noticing. But if you think the problem ends there, you're mistaken. There's something even more insidious, something that slips by unnoticed because it seems normal, but is actually another form of hidden contempt. We've reached the second key point of this video. When that person close to you only reaches out when they need something, never out of affection. It's predictable. When the phone rings, when a message pops up, it's never to ask how you're doing, never to check if you're feeling lonely, never to invite you out for a coffee just because. No, it's to ask for a favor, a loan, a bit of help, advice they'll never actually follow. And you, with the generous heart that's carried you through so many years, rush to answer. Because you think, it's my duty, it's my son, it's my brother, it's my lifelong friend. But when you hang up, you're left with that familiar emptiness. You know that call wasn't about you, it was about what you could give. I know this stings, especially at this stage in life where you start to value genuine connections over obligations. But this pattern is dangerous. Not because helping is wrong, but because when a relationship becomes one-sided, where you're always giving and rarely receiving, what's being drained isn't just your time or your money, it's your very life force. The Stoics understood something crucial. Life is far too short to waste it on those who don't value your presence. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, do few things, but do them well. And I'd add, invest your time in people who see your worth for who you are, not for what you can offer. But here's the problem. Out of habit, out of fear of feeling unnecessary, we keep allowing this dynamic. We convince ourselves it's normal to be sought out only when someone needs something, as if that's proof they still need us. But let me be clear, you don't need to be useful to be valuable. You don't have to be constantly available to prove your love. And you definitely shouldn't let your peace of mind depend on other people's needs. Because what happens when this dynamic settles into your life? You start measuring your self-worth by how much you help. You believe you're only important if you're solving other people's problems. But when the favor's done, when there's nothing left to give, you're left alone again, facing the silence, wondering if you even matter. This vicious cycle takes more of a toll than you realize. I've seen it hundreds of times. Older people emotionally exhausted, not because life treated them unfairly, but because they've spent years being everyone else's crutch, while no one stops to ask if they need support too. And it doesn't just wear you out, it makes you sick. Anxiety creeps in when you know the next message will be another request. Sadness shows up when you realize genuine moments of connection are becoming rare. And instead of living your later years in peace, you end up stuck in an endless loop of poorly repaid favors. But here's something I don't want you to overlook. Someone who truly loves you also shows up when they don't need anything. They're there to share joy, worries, even silence. And you deserve that kind of relationship. God made us to live in community, but not to be used. Real love doesn't measure people's worth by their usefulness. God doesn't do it with you. You don't need to let others do it either. So what can you do? The first step is to observe without making excuses. Who only calls when they need something? Who only shows up when it benefits them? You don't need to cut them off completely, but you do need to start setting boundaries. Not every favor is an obligation. Not every request deserves an immediate response. Being stoic isn't about enduring everything, it's about knowing what's worth your energy and what isn't. Think about this. When was the last time someone reached out just to see how you were, with no hidden agenda? If you can't remember, it's time to change something, because your peace and your worth don't depend on how many favors you do. They depend on how you choose to relate to those around you. And believe me, the next point is going to open your eyes even more, because many fall into it without even realizing, and that's where your dignity really starts to wear down. Don't go anywhere. We've already seen how some people only come to you when it benefits them, treating you like an emotional ATM. But there's something even more subtle, more corrosive, that you need to spot before it's too late. We've reached the third key point of this video, and this is where things start to shift. If you decide to take control, they subtly discredit your decisions in front of others. It's not a direct attack. They're not yelling, they're not openly insulting you. It happens casually over coffee, between laughs, when you share something that excites you, and without you noticing, someone slips in a seemingly harmless comment. Well, you know how they are. Always so over the top. Still thinking about that at their age? I wouldn't do that. But hey, it's your choice. And the others smile, maybe without catching the dagger hidden in those words. But you feel it. Because it's not just the comment. It's the intent to shrink you in front of others, to plant doubt in you and those around you, to make you seem weak, childish, or unreasonable. Why would someone do this? Because those who can't stand your decisions can't stand your freedom either. Because someone who hasn't taken control of their own life needs you to stay afraid of taking control of yours. And there's the poison. They mask their insecurity with condescension, acting as if they know better, as if their way of living is the only right one. Seneca once said, "There's nothing more miserable than living by someone else's opinion." Yet many of you, maybe without realizing, have spent years letting those opinions discredit your choices, shaping your days to avoid those looks, those thinly veiled comments. The strategy to break this pattern is simple, but it takes courage. Respond calmly, but firmly. When someone tries to discredit your choices in front of others, don't defend yourself like you're wrong. Look them in the eye and say clearly, "This is my choice, and I'm at peace with it." You don't need to justify yourself, you don't need to play their game. Because every time you explain, when you over-clarify, you hand them the power to question you. But when you speak from certainty, from the conviction that your life doesn't need anyone's approval, that's when you take back control. Let me give you a simple example. Picture a tree. When the wind blows, the branches sway, the leaves tremble. But the trunk, if its roots are strong, remains unshaken. Your decisions are that trunk. The opinions, the subtle comments, they're just the wind. Are you going to let them uproot you every time someone disapproves of what you do? Or will you stand firm, knowing the only opinions that define your life are yours and God's? Putting this into practice doesn't just shift the dynamic with those around you, it changes something deeper. How you see yourself. It restores your peace, your autonomy, the certainty that no matter who tries to discredit you, as long as you respect yourself, you're untouchable. Because those who live off others' validation end up begging for crumbs, and you've lived too much to keep asking for permission. Now, if these words are striking a chord with you, if you know you've seen these signs in your own life, I invite you to subscribe and give this video a like. That way, we'll keep growing together and bringing you content that strengthens your confidence and dignity. Tell me in the comments which country you're watching from, and write the phrase, "I protect my well-being," because that's the first act of healthy rebellion against those who want to control you. Stick around, because the signs coming next will open your eyes even more, and the last one is the hardest to accept, but also the most freeing. We've just talked about how other people's judgments, those seemingly harmless words, can weaken you if you don't learn to shut them down. But there's something even more corrosive, something that doesn't just come from outside, but quietly takes root within you. It's a mental trap that silently ruins your well-being and autonomy because it robs you of the ability to fully enjoy even your happiest moments. Now, it's time to talk about the fourth point, a dangerous sign many overlook. They never celebrate your happiness, and if they can, they ruin it. Maybe this sounds familiar? You share good news, a small achievement, a plan that excites you, an experience that fills your soul, and that close person reacts with indifference, changes the subject, or worse, finds a way to dim it. They say things like, "Well, it's not that big of a deal. Are you sure that's a good idea?" Or drop a comment soaked in negativity to overshadow your joy. They do it subtly, almost as if they're protecting you from getting your hopes up too high. But it's not protection, it's envy, it's resentment, it's the inability to stand seeing you content when they're not. And here's where the trap starts to sink in. Without realizing it, you begin holding back your joy. You stop sharing, afraid it'll be spoiled. You convince yourself it's better not to get too excited, not to dream, not to let yourself feel too much. You self-censor, and that's where you lose, because your life stops being a free space and becomes conditioned by the emotional limits of others. Stoicism warns us about this in a simple but powerful way. Don't place your happiness in anyone else's hands. Marcus Aurelius insisted that true joy comes from within, that no outside circumstance has the power to steal your peace unless you hand it over. But when you allow someone close to poison your happy moments, you're doing exactly that, giving them permission to decide when you're allowed to feel good. The problem is, over the years, many people carry the idea that they need to shrink themselves to fit in, to avoid making others uncomfortable, especially if it's a child, a sibling, a partner. They think, "I don't want to seem selfish," or "I don't want them to think I'm showing off." But when did celebrating your own steps forward become selfishness? Since when is being content with what you've built something to feel guilty about? Letting someone ruin your happy moments is a slow, silent form of sabotage. It makes you small, cautious, constantly feeling like you have to apologize for being happy. And at this stage in life, you shouldn't be asking anyone's permission to feel gratitude and joy for what you've achieved. Life has already charged you enough. Don't deny yourself the right to enjoy every light that appears along your path. And there's a deeper spiritual truth here. What does the gospel say? Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Joy isn't a luxury, it's a blessing. It's proof that you're alive, aware, and grateful. Suppressing it out of fear of criticism isn't humility, it's submission. So ask yourself right now, how many times have you stopped yourself from speaking enthusiastically about something good in your life because you know that certain person will dampen it? How many times have you felt the need to hide your happiness to avoid stirring up envy? Every time you do, you give away a little more of your inner freedom. Next time something good happens, celebrate it. Even if it's in silence, even if it's just with yourself. And pay attention to who reacts with annoyance or indifference, not to argue, but to understand who's truly by your side and who only feels comfortable when you make yourself smaller. Because if you can't share your joys with someone, maybe they don't deserve to be there on your cloudy days either. Stick around, because what's coming goes even deeper. There's a sign that doesn't just drain your emotions, it directly attacks your ability to set boundaries. And that's where the real damage begins. Let's break it down. If by now you've realized how certain people close to you can ruin even your happiest moments, then the next pattern won't surprise you, and it's far more damaging than most people are willing to admit. We've reached the 5th point of this video, and here it is. They make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. It's one of the oldest and most effective ways to control you. They don't need to yell or demand something outright. All it takes is a sigh, a disappointed glance, a poisoned comment that leaves you second-guessing. Am I being selfish? Am I failing as a parent, a friend? Guilt seeps in quietly, like damp, creeping into the walls until they're completely weakened. And without noticing, you start giving in, saying yes when you wanted to say no, taking on responsibilities that aren't yours, abandoning your own space and time for fear of seeming insensitive. But here's the truth no one likes to hear. Every time you let guilt dictate your decisions, you're not just losing autonomy, you're losing respect. People, even those who claim to love you, quickly learn that all they have to do is make you feel bad to get you to do what they want. And at that point, you're no longer in control of your life. You're a pawn, moved by others' expectations. The consequences are devastating. First comes frustration, that bitter feeling of always giving, always being available, while wondering when it'll finally be your turn to be cared for, to be heard. Then comes emotional dependence, because you get used to thinking your worth depends on how much you please others, how often you sacrifice your well-being to keep everyone happy. And finally, the loss of respect, not just from others, but from yourself. You start believing that maybe this is all you deserve, that maybe you have no right to ask for anything more. Let me be clear, that's a lie. A trap that if you don't break free from it, will lead you straight into a bitter, empty old age where your life revolves around everyone else's needs, not your own purpose. Can it be reversed? Yes, but it's not easy. It's not as simple as flipping a switch and saying, "From now on, I'll say no." This is an inner battle. It requires changing how you understand love, responsibility, and your own worth. And here's where Stoicism becomes key again. Epictetus taught that we're not responsible for other people's emotions, only our own. And that applies especially to those we love. Loving someone doesn't mean being their servant. Compassion doesn't mean weakness. The mindset you need to adopt is simple to say, but hard to practice. Your well-being is your responsibility, and no one has the right to manipulate it with guilt. God gave you free will, not so you'd live at the mercy of others' approval, but so you'd live as a whole, dignified, autonomous person. Every time you set a boundary, do it with respect, not aggression. And anyone who truly loves you will respect it. Those who don't, chances are they only loved you while you were useful. I know making that decision isn't easy. You'll face long faces, passive-aggressive comments, invitations laced with guilt trips. But let me ask you something. How much longer are you willing to sacrifice your peace just to avoid a few moments of discomfort? Because I can promise you this. The discomfort of setting boundaries today is nothing compared to the resentment that builds up after years of giving in to guilt. The choice is yours. There are no magic fixes here, no empty promises. Just one path: to reclaim your time, your energy, and your self-respect by no longer living under the weight of those who don't know how to respect your limits. And stay with me, because what we're about to look at goes even deeper. There's a sign many people overlook, but it leaves scars far deeper than you might imagine. We're about to uncover it. We've talked about guilt, how, if you don't stop it, it turns you into an emotional servant, always putting others first, always leaving yourself for later. But if you think the damage ends there, you're underestimating the problem. There's something subtler, quieter, that usually comes hand in hand with that guilt, and it leaves scars just as deep. This is the 6th point of the video. when that close person talks behind your back, even though they smile to your face. I want you to pause for a moment and picture this with brutal honesty. Imagine yourself walking through a market, a church, a family gathering. You run into people who greet you, hug you, maybe even congratulate you. But without you knowing, just days or even hours ago, their words about you were sharp as knives. Comments that belittle your decisions, that magnify your flaws, that question your way of living, all when you're not there to defend yourself. Now imagine spending years without realizing it, trusting, opening up, while behind your back they're sowing doubts, rumors, veiled criticism. This isn't a simple betrayal, it's a systematic form of wear and tear. Because while you're still showing up, helping, being available, they're building a distorted image of you for others. And one day, when you start noticing the coldness, the distance, the odd looks from people who used to be close, you don't understand why. But there's the root. They've sabotaged you without you even knowing it. Letting someone like that stay in your life doesn't just damage your reputation, it affects something far more valuable, your inner peace. Because doubt starts creeping in, distrust takes hold, and you're left with that bitter feeling that nothing you do is ever enough. And the cruelest part? Often, that person is family, a child, a sibling, a lifelong friend. Someone you've trusted blindly, never imagining that while they're smiling in front of you, they're spreading poison behind your back. Don't sugarcoat this with excuses. Don't tell me, maybe they don't mean it that way, because we're not talking about one isolated comment. This is a pattern, a relationship built on double-speak, and the damage is anything but minor. You end up questioning who you really are. You start keeping quiet to avoid being misrepresented. You adapt, shrink yourself, become more cautious, until you lose your spontaneity, your joy, your confidence. The truth is, you can't control what others say about you, but you can control who you allow to stay in your circle. Seneca said, "We should distance ourselves from those who drag us into mediocrity and resentment." And though it may hurt to admit, sometimes the greatest act of self-love is cutting that tie, or at least reducing it to the bare minimum. Think about it. What's the point of continuing to offer your time and energy to someone who won't respect your name when you're not in the room? Why keep sitting at the table with someone who, the moment you get up, starts tearing you apart to others? That dynamic doesn't just destroy relationships, it destroys how you see yourself. So let me ask you directly, are you going to keep giving them space, pretending you don't know, turning a blind eye just to avoid the discomfort? Because if you don't do something, if you don't break that pattern, you'll end up facing old age surrounded by falseness, unsure who's real and who's just waiting for you to leave so they can tear you down. What's coming next is even more revealing, because many believe it doesn't affect them, that they can handle it, but in reality, it's the root of the unhealthy competition that wears you down day after day. Stick with me, because you're going to recognize it immediately. After realizing there are people around you who speak poorly of you behind your back, you might think there's nothing worse, that there's no deeper betrayal. But let me tell you something. There's still one more sign, subtler, quieter, and often the most draining, because it plays out day after day, slipping under your radar. We've reached the 7th point of this video, and it's this. That person close to you constantly competes with you, even if you haven't noticed. This isn't about fake hugs or direct comments. This plays out in the invisible territory of comparison. You see it in the little gestures. When you share an accomplishment, and without missing a beat, they reply with something that tops what you just said. When you offer your opinion, and instead of listening, their response is to correct you, to show they know more, have lived more, are always one step ahead. The trap is that it feels normal. Society has taught us to compete, even with the ones we love, as if our self-worth depends on coming out on top. But ask yourself, with brutal honesty, how much room have you allowed for that silent competition in your life? How many times have you held back to avoid starting an argument, to avoid falling into that absurd battle of who's right, who's suffered more, who knows best? That's not a healthy relationship. It's a constant drain, and it steals what you should be protecting most at this stage in life, your peace. Constant competition reflects the other person's insecurity, yes, but it's also a sign that you've allowed their insecurities to set the tone of the relationship. There's no room for excuses here. If you keep measuring yourself against someone who needs to see you as a rival, the problem isn't just theirs, it's yours too. Because, as Marcus Aurelius put it, we're each responsible for our actions, but also for how often we choose to be dragged down by someone else's foolishness. The result is obvious. You find yourself exhausted, always defending your decisions, your knowledge, your experiences, as if you need to justify your life. And that's not freedom. It's a prison built on constant comparison, a competition with no end and only one outcome, the loss of your peace. Today, I invite you to stop sugarcoating it. Stop pretending that's just how they are, and start asking yourself why you're still holding on to a relationship based on rivalry. You're not here to compete. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. If you're still caught up in the game of responding, comparing, measuring your worth based on who wins the argument, you're hurting yourself, and no philosophy or spirituality will save you until you decide to step out of that dynamic. The transformation begins when you accept that it's not your duty to be more or less than anyone else. Your life isn't a race, and it's not a contest. Anyone who can't be around you without feeling threatened simply doesn't belong in your inner circle. And as long as you keep feeding that competition, you're ensuring an old age full of exhaustion, meaningless arguments, and shallow relationships. So here's the question. Are you going to keep measuring your worth based on who corrects you, who outdoes you, who makes you feel small? Because no one's going to change that for you. Only you can break the pattern. There's no room for denial here, no room to dress it up. It's time to face it. And what's coming next is the hardest sign to accept, but also the one that will make everything crystal clear, so you can finally make a definitive decision. Stay with me. Now is when it all becomes unmistakably clear. After realizing you've spent years, maybe even decades, silently competing with people who should have been allies, not rivals, it becomes clear that the root of the problem isn't just in them. It's in you, in the unspoken permission you've given, in the absence of boundaries, in the need for approval. But if you thought that was the worst of it, there's an even subtler, more devastating gesture that many people normalize. This is the 8th point of the video, when that close person ignores your needs, yet demands your full attention. There are no raised voices here, no direct confrontation, just indifference. That quiet indifference that slowly starts to erase your existence. You need to be heard, understood, supported, but every time you express a need, a wish, a worry, you're met with evasions, excuses, a lack of interest. Yet when they need something suddenly, you're expected to be available, attentive, accommodating, without hesitation. It's an unequal relationship, and you know it. But the trap is, you've gotten used to it. You've learned to accept the imbalance as if it's natural, as if it's your role. Do you know what this does to you over time? It wears down your self-esteem, slowly and steadily. You start to believe your needs matter less, that it's fine if no one asks how you're doing, if no one notices your silences. So you keep giving your energy to people who don't know how to give it back. Until one day, you feel that deep exhaustion, that sense of having poured everything out and received nothing in return. Now I want you to do something concrete, something immediate. The next time that person asks something of you, a favor, your time, your attention, stop before answering. Ask yourself, When was the last time this person showed up for me without me having to ask? If you don't have a clear answer, if all you find is silence, it's time to change the dynamic. Say no, not aggressively, but from the conviction that you can't keep emptying yourself for someone who won't even try to fill you back up. But let me warn you, this change won't be comfortable. The first time you set a boundary, you'll feel the urge to backtrack, because the complaints will come, the long faces, the classic, but you've always been there. And that's exactly when you need to hold the line. No one is going to give you back your dignity. It's up to you to reclaim it. Stoicism is clear on this. Epictetus taught that real good and real harm don't lie in external things, but in how we choose to act. It's not about what others do for you, it's about what you allow. If you keep accepting that your needs don't matter, you're choosing to live half a life. But if you decide to start caring for yourself, to stop giving your time and energy out of obligation, that's when your liberation begins. So today, I'm not asking for grand plans or empty promises. I'm asking for one concrete action. The next time you feel that imbalance, don't respond automatically. Pause, reflect, and decide if you truly want to keep giving in, because no one else will make that choice for you. What comes next is the hardest blow, the final reflection of everything you've allowed. And it's here that you'll understand why, as painful as it is, cutting certain ties is the only dignified way forward. Stay with me. Now comes the truth most people don't want to hear. I've already talked to you about the silent trap of those who ignore your needs while demanding you're always available. And I made it clear. Breaking that cycle makes people uncomfortable. Setting boundaries throws off those who've spent years getting used to watching you give in. But now we've reached the final point, the one that closes the circle and reveals the true face of these toxic relationships. This is the 9th point. When that person close to you mocks your beliefs, dreams, or values. There's no room for doubt here. These aren't innocent remarks or harmless differences of opinion. This is direct disrespect toward the very things that hold you up, that give meaning to your days. Maybe they ridicule your faith, make snide jokes about your desire to learn something new, belittle the fact that you still have goals and dreams at your age. They throw lines at you like, "You still believe that nonsense? Why dream at your age? You're not going to change anything now. Faith is for weak people." And for years, maybe you've lowered your head, kept quiet to avoid conflict, to keep life simple. But that resignation is the biggest mistake. This is where many fall into self-deception. You tell yourself, that's just how they are. They don't mean any harm. It's not worth arguing over nonsense. Let them think whatever they want. And the more you justify it, the more space you give them to wear you down. Because this isn't about differing opinions. It's about a constant mockery that chips away at your roots, that slowly erodes your confidence, your faith, your ability to stay excited about something that's yours. What they can't stand isn't your faith or your dreams. What they can't tolerate is that you still have a flame burning while they've given themselves over to the dark. Do you know what's the most common excuse I hear when I talk to people in their 60s or 70s about this? They say, "At my age, why would I change now?" Or, "I'm too old to start confronting anyone." As if age were a sentence, as if resignation were more comfortable than standing up for their dignity. But let me tell you an uncomfortable truth. That's a mental trap that guarantees only one thing, that you'll reach your later years carrying resentment, frustration, and a deep emptiness. Because what you don't defend today rots tomorrow. Your faith, your values, your dreams, they're not decoration. They are the backbone holding you up. And if you allow others to mock them without setting boundaries, you're not being peaceful, you're being complicit in your own erosion. Seneca put it plainly, life is long enough if you know how to live it. And living doesn't mean lowering your head to those who scorn what's sacred to you. The choice is blunt, but simple. Either you start defending what you believe in, even if it's just with firm silence and distance, or you keep handing over your peace to those who only know how to ridicule it. There are no soft speeches here, no hollow motivation. It's a choice between standing tall or continuing to shrink, between living by your principles or living under the expectations of those who don't even respect who you are. Now you know the signs. Now you know it's not your imagination, not an overreaction. It's real. And the question is this: what are you going to do with this truth? Because no one is coming to rescue you from relationships you continue to sustain. No one. Except you. This is where the story you've been telling yourself either begins or ends. And the decision, as always, is yours alone. If you've made it this far, you're not like most people. You're not someone who stays on the surface, avoiding what hurts, justifying others' behavior, so you don't have to look inward. I know that because this video hasn't been a gentle pat, it's been a mirror. And facing that reflection, the raw truth that someone close to you, maybe even someone in your own family, despises you in silence, uses you, discredits you, or competes with you, isn't easy. I'm not here to comfort you with false hope or to promise life will magically change. I'm here to remind you of something you may have forgotten. Life is too short and too precious to keep giving it away to those who don't respect you. At this point, there are only two paths. You can either keep allowing these dynamics, tied down by guilt, fear, or habit, and grow old, wondering why no one values you. Or you can decide today to cut through the illusion of peace and start building something real. A peace that depends on no one's approval but yours and God's. I'm Gabriel, and I created the Stoic Garden for those who are done settling for empty speeches, for those who are seeking real serenity, the kind that comes when you take charge of your life without excuses. Here, we speak plainly, because after 55, 60, 70 years, what you need isn't more sugarcoating, it's tools, truths, and perspective to live with dignity and strength until your very last day. Now I'm asking you for something. If these words have resonated with you, if they've opened your eyes, leave a comment with your country and the phrase, "My peace is non-negotiable." Because anyone who writes that is someone who's decided they will no longer let anyone else define their worth. And if this video has helped you, subscribe and join this community that chooses every day to live with clarity, with purpose, and without submitting to anyone else's emotional mediocrity. Share it with someone who, even if they don't say it, you know needs to hear these truths. The conversation doesn't end here. Stick around and watch one of the two videos that will appear on screen. Each one is another step toward freeing yourself from those invisible chains and starting to live on your own terms. I'll see you there. Here, in the Stoic Garden, where we're not here to entertain you, we're here to wake you up.